Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Pro Soccer Talk. I'm your host, Joe Prince-Wright, based over here in England. Delighted to say I'm joined by Nick Mendola in Buffalo, New York, and Andy Edwards in Kansas City. Lads, it's that time of the year again with the Premier League. It's absolutely bonkers. Top four battle is intense. Relegation scrap is all over the place. Nick, what have you enjoyed over the last week, mate? A lot has happened, hasn't it, in the Premier League?
I got to be honest with you, didn't enjoy a lot, Joe. The two teams that I enjoy the most, one for style and another because of misery, are a point ahead of the drop zone. So, you know, my seagulls aren't exactly flying, and Newcastle is Newcastle.
Yeah, not a good week for your teams, mate. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of twists and turns ahead. And Andy, you're smiling there. I know exactly why. It's been a pretty good week for your team. You must have enjoyed the resurgence of Gareth Bale. Finally.
I won't say anything to jinx it. I will just continue to let it exist on its own in a space all by itself. I'll just ask Nick, do you think that's a you problem? That's a character flaw that you gravitate towards that?
So yeah, I've never gotten into this with you guys. Maybe not even with Joe, but I fell in with Newcastle because of Alan Shearer and the Brown Ale, and bought a book on it. And the book that was on Amazon was called 50 Years of Hurt. And then at the time, I'm a Cubs fan. They hadn't won in a long while. The Bills and Sabres, it's just all coming together for me. Larry Bird's the only reason I've seen anything in my life.
Wow, Mendola, a glutton for punishment there. Unbelievable. But lads, on a more positive note, I enjoy this transatlantic beer we have and a chat each week. So cheers to you boys over there. Thanks for joining us for Pro Soccer Talk. We're ready to kick things off this week, and we have a lot to talk about, so let's get straight into it. Big news topic, Manchester United. What is Manchester United's identity? We've been racking our brains trying to figure this out for probably the last, 8 years since Fergie left, and I don't think we're any closer to finding out, but what we did see is they went away to Manchester City, ended their 21-game winning run, a wonderful counter-attacking display. They do that really well against the big teams quite often. And even though they've had a few draws this season, apart from getting hammered by Spurs early on, they've done okay in the big games. But Nick, tactically on the pitch, what is their identity? When you switch on the TV to watch Manchester United, what do you expect to see them under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer? What do you expect to see them do?
So I've come to realize that a big part of it is Harry Maguire. And he has his issues, right? He definitely has his issues. But with Paul Pogba out, he is still a guy who doesn't make a lot of mistakes going forward. He's very aggressive, kind of becomes a third defensive midfielder at times. And so I want to give him some credit, especially because he started this year so poorly on and off the field. Luke Shaw's changed things a bit, but it's so hard to tell their identity because they don't have Paul Pogba out there right now. And for me, as good as Bruno Fernandes is, we talked on the show maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, about how we know what they're doing in their own third. We know a little bit of what they're trying to do on the counterattack, but connecting play I still don't get. And it's a little bit better. I think McTominay's really growing into himself, but the identity still seems to be we're Manchester United, and so we're going to win.
Yeah, let me use a phrase here to describe what I would call them. They are very risk averse, and I think there's a lot of kind of leftover, if it's mentality or tactical ideas from the Jose Mourinho era at Manchester United, where when he would play those big teams, you would spend all week getting excited for those games, and then it would just be the worst fixture of the entire weekend.
So what you're saying is they've been scarred by Jose Mourinho and they're still not quite getting past that. And it's
when you look at the squad, a lot of those players that are still there were signed during his, albeit pretty brief tenure at Old Trafford. So it makes sense. There's a lot of very functional players in that team. And really, there's only about 2 players that I think stand out above and have kind of any individual characteristics to their game. And it's Bruno Fernandes and it's Marcus Rashford. And then everybody else is just kind of a cog in the machine. And it works against the lesser teams. They've cleaned up against teams in the bottom half and even, outside of the top 6 this season. But when it comes to those big 6 teams and even some of the big 7 and big 8 teams up there, if you throw Everton and I believe West Ham into the mix, they struggle a little bit. It's not flashy, it's not exciting, and even when they win, when they beat Manchester City on the weekend, it doesn't look dominant, it doesn't look in control, but they did just enough.
Would it be weird?
Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, would it be weird to say that there's a little bit of Mourinho residue that happens to teams? Maybe, I guess it'd be resume. Like it's it's almost like he's got these teams playing so rigid. And I feel like we've seen it at Chelsea, even after, he left and they won. Is it a situation where you now know defensively the right idea, but you've got a little bit more freedom? And I kind of want to give him credit for that, because that is one thing. He may not always have the pieces to do it, but the tactics are generally on. And I remember that game he brought in Tanganga, one of the first times he brought him in. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, here's a piece that works, but it isn't mature enough. So would that be fair to say that he leaves a little bit of a, whether you want to call it a stain or a platform or a foundation, maybe that's working out for them? Yeah,
I agree with that. And I think one thing I always think about when I'm thinking about Manchester United's identity is that this is still a team that has players, Louis van Gaal, Mourinho, even some guys, David Moyes, not many left over from that era, but there's still a lot of pieces from different managers, different styles, different identity. And now when you look at Solskjaer, he has taken that solid platform, Nick, and he's added pace and attacking and counter-attacking. So that's why they've been so impressive. And Bruno Fernandes said that that's one of our best traits, to counter-attack and to be quick on the counter in transitions. And Rashford, obviously Martial, Dan James, now has stepped up really well, and Luke Shaw, the surgeon runs, and Fernandes is key to dictating all of that. And I think Solskjaer deserves some credit, because the actual signings he's made since he's been in as a permanent manager, it's been pretty good. Wan-Bissaka's coming, he's coming up with the goods now, said Dan James. And then you've got other players that they're signing under the radar through the youth ranks. You look at someone like Amad Diallo, they've paid big money to Atalanta for him. And there's that philosophy and identity, okay, we've got good young players coming in, we're going to give them opportunity, and that bodes well for the future, and actually have a clear style and identity. And, we've heard Ed Woodward praise Solskjaer and say we've had lots of progress. Still not sure how much progress United have made over the last 8 years since Fergie left. But Andy, I want to ask you about this off the pitch. What is the club identity behind the scenes? I mean, we talk about a director of football and this kind of thing, but what is the club of Manchester United? Has their identity changed at all since Fergie was in charge?
Yeah, it's certainly changed. In a word, I would call it chaotic. It's very reactionary. They sign a lot of really good, talented players, a lot of quality players that have some success, have some struggles at Manchester United. A handful of them leave and they go on to have some even more success elsewhere. I think there's a lack of a singular idea of what they want to build, how they want to build, and how they want to get to where we know where they want to get to. They want to be back on the top of the Premier League. They want to be one of those very, very top teams in Europe again. It's where they believe they belong, but it seems like there's either zero ideas of how to build to get back there, or there's 100 ideas of how to build to get back there, and they can't settle on one or even 10 of them on a given day to try to work towards it. It feels like there's a lot of pieces, important pieces at the club that are pointing completely different directions. And I mean more so kind of in the front office side of things, away from the coaching staff, away from the players.
Nick, you agree with that?
Mostly, yeah. I think it does come down to a few things. One, I almost feel like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was in a situation where he planned to play a sort of expansive possession football that everybody would love. And it's a little bit like when you're a band and you make an album and you order all the tracks, you put out the first single, you put out the second single, and then the people who have the CD love track 8. And so you keep playing track 8 because that's the hit. And I look at guys like Mata not playing, no, he's not in his prime. And I look at maybe even Alex Tellez, and I think he thought he was going to have this surgical team that needed to cut people open. And what he's found, and this is why Dan James is starting more than anything, is he wants that speed and adventure on the counter. So I think he has, kind of credit to him, ended up not playing the hits, so to speak. And The one thing we talked about in our pre-show meeting to lift the curtain was that idea of aura, right? That idea of Manchester United being one of the biggest clubs in the world. And in my opinion, and I'm not a fan of theirs, so don't get mad at me, Liverpool, City, Chelsea fans. I think the two clubs I hear about more than anything, more than any other club in the world from a random person, is Real Madrid and Manchester United. And that pains me to say. I'm a Messi guy, I'm a Barca guy, but Real Madrid, Manchester United. And those are two teams that carry an aura. And you might argue that Solskjaer and Zidane have succeeded by massaging egos and just telling everybody. I mean, Harry Maguire's post-match answer for 2 years after he was made captain has been, well, we're Manchester United. We expect big things. We asked you what you had for dinner, Harry. Oh, well, we're Manchester United and we had big things. Like, I think the aura is a big, big part of it, Joe. And I think that's something you've pointed out in the past.
Definitely. And it goes to Ollie's said that multiple times. Obviously, Bruno's even kind of saying it now. And that nostalgia, that feeling of we have to get back to these days. Even, if we finish in the top four, that's not good enough because we're Manchester United. And there's something to be said for that. The high levels and targets they set themselves as a club, as a playing staff, and the fans as well. You need to see the reactions. Even when they beat Manchester City, it's, we should have been dominant. It was a good win, but we should be in the title race. So, Andy, I'm going to ask you that. What does success look like this season? I mean, top four is great. They're probably not going to be in the title race. I think we can all agree that's over. But top four in a trophy, that's good enough, right? This season, that's progress.
So I've come a long way in the last few weeks or so, because I was pretty solid in if they finish second this season, given where they were last year and given the previous 6 seasons since Ferguson left, second place finish would be a sign of progress, upward movement for this club. But then I think since then they've gone on a run sorry to bring it up, Joe, since they beat Southampton 9-0, they have drawn, won, and won. They have drawn 4 out of their last 6 and dropped a lot of points against the likes of Everton, West Brom, Chelsea, Crystal Palace. I need to see them be more. It is now, it's more about how they get to wherever they finish than where they actually finish. If they finish 3rd or 4th, but they have a run of games where they just look completely dominant and somehow Leicester City catches fire the rest of the season and they just beat them to second place, that's fine. If Manchester United can exert some kind of dominance and talk about that aura that you guys were just talking about, then I think that's the biggest thing that they can do for themselves going into not only next season, but the transfer window, to convince the caliber player that they need to add to that squad, the attacking player, the creative, the superstar, the global superstar to that team to take them to the next level.
I agree with that. And I want to finish. They've only lost 1 game since the 1st of November in the Premier League, which is crazy to think about. They've had a lot of success. There's been some bumps, like we said, against teams they should probably beat, but they've come unstuck when teams won't allow them to counterattack. So that's that identity issue again. They're still figuring that out. But I think it's fair to say off the pitch, their identity as a club, they're still a mega club. Like Nick said, they're still one of the biggest clubs in the world. On the pitch, they're still figuring it out. But you have to give Solskjaer some credit. I think with the recruitment policy, even if he isn't quite in charge of that, the players he wants have made a difference. And if they can carry on in that vein, then they can figure out a different way to take it on Manchester City, Chelsea, and Liverpool when they rebound as well. So Man United are always interesting, this season especially. And you have to say that if they finish in the top 4 and win the FA Cup or the Europa League, then that's progress for Solskjaer's boys. So we'll keep you updated on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com and United's progress both in Europe and in the Premier League. Have lots of analysis and reaction on the Red Devils as they are kicking on in the Premier League. Next big topic, boys. This is going to be one I feel like we focus on for pretty much maybe the next 12 months, maybe all the way up until the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. Does Christian Pulisic have a future at Chelsea? I say this because he's played, and these are the stats, 134 minutes out of a possible 810 minutes in the Premier League since Thomas Tuchel took over for Frank Lampard. So in short, that is not a lot. He came on for the final 30 seconds of regulation and their win against Everton. Chelsea are 11 games unbeaten in all competition, flying under Tuchel since he's been in charge, back in the top 4. And I had the chance to speak with Thomas Tuchel and asked him about Pulisic's situation after their win against Everton. So why is he not playing more? Is there a problem with, injuries, confidence? Is it the system he's playing in? And have a listen here. We're going to play the video, what Thomas Tuchel said to me, and I think it's going to raise a few eyebrows. Right, lads?
Yeah, and I cannot say nothing else than positive things about him. Maybe his problem is that I know from Dortmund how strong he is from the bench. I think he started only in the cup game, and it's in the end my responsibility and my fault. But like I said, is a bit unfair because I know how good he is and what an impact he can have in 20-30 minutes. And he was a bit unlucky in the last games. So there's no lack of trust, there's no lack of quality, it's just maybe to be a bit patient.
Okay, so that's what Thomas Tuchel had to say about Christian Pulisic and his lack of time and playing minutes at Chelsea. Nick, what do you think about that?
So I'm trying to keep in perspective the fact that when you hear this guy talk after games, he gives you a lot of information. It's terribly interesting. He goes into his tactics. It's almost that soccer coach symposium after the game. He tells you exactly what happened. And I kind of want to take some of this at face value. And if he's viewing Pulisic as a 20 to 30 minute impact sub, and maybe that's just his best excuse for I prefer other guys over him in the starting lineup, I can deal with that. And it just has to become something where we see that play out more. I remember there were also 2 or 3 games in the middle he missed there. But again, 134 out of a possible 8-10 minutes, the way he's been going, are we saying anything different if it's 203 minutes out of a possible 8-10? But I do want to take into account that we have not seen a lot of Tuchel press conferences at Chelsea. And this is a guy who's very, very intelligent, who has taken the reins for Jurgen Klopp and for Unai Emery, right? 2 people who had good success at those clubs. And I think he's used to tamping down expectations and playing the long game. So I'm hopeful.
Andy, what about you?
The Tuchel dynamic is definitely at play. And Nick brings up a good point in the fact that he's obviously very intelligent, he's very thoughtful, and he's a deep thinker, and he's uncharacteristically willing to kind of explain his line of thinking to the general public, which there's not really a lot of upside in doing that. And I would imagine that probably doesn't last too particularly long now that he is in the Premier League and he's dealing with the British press, the way that will get at some point. I mean, they've not lost under him, so they've not had the opportunity yet. But when the opportunity comes to take something that he says a little bit too much and twist it or turn it against him, he will learn and he will eventually stop doing that. I also think the language, not barrier, but just the language factor is at play here. If you're ever trying to kind of dance around giving an honest answer to a question, your brain is working a million miles an hour inside your head. And that's in your first language, let alone your second or third language. And then you have to kind of, put something out there. So I think it's a little bit brutally honest from him. In a way, I appreciate it. In a way, it really frustrates me because 30 seconds is not 30 minutes. And this is still a Chelsea team that, for as good as they've been defensively, they're winning a lot of games 1-0 or 2-1. They could use some goals. Could they not use a little bit more of just attacking impetus and something to push them forward, to drive them forward? And it's not Callum Hudson-Odoi. It doesn't look like it's Timo Werner, other than to finish chances. Kai Havertz had a good game, but it has to be Pulisic. If it's anyone in that squad, it has to be him.
Andy, great point there. A lot of angry US men's national team fans out there are saying, why is Timo Werner getting so many chances? He's not putting them away. He's playing a lot, getting a lot of minutes, but he isn't scoring goals. So why couldn't Pulisic come in and play? And for me, I'm looking at this, and like you said, it's brutally honest. And I honestly think that if Christian Pulisic is watching that or hearing those quotes, he will be very confused because he seems to know Thomas Tuchel very well from the time at Dortmund together. Tuchel referenced that when he answered my question, and that was a long time ago. So there's a lot's happened, and Pulisic's developed as a player. a lot since then, since he was young and kind of come on for the last 20 or 30 minutes at Dortmund. So if Tuchel was kind of pigeonholed him into being that player off the bench, then I don't think that's a very good thing for Christian Pulisic, because clearly he hasn't changed his opinion of him as a player in the first few months in charge at Chelsea. So my question, Nick Mandola, to you is, if he's not playing at Chelsea, can he still dominate for the US men's national team? I think that would be the big question for all fans of the USA, right?
Yes, and I think the answer is yes for a time. We've seen this happen for other teams. The guy that I think about right away, and I haven't been able to think of anyone better, so hopefully you guys can get me, is Mkhitaryan when he wasn't playing a lot for, and again, that's a much smaller, sorry to the Armenians out there, but that is a smaller endeavor. They're often the underdogs. He has to be their best player. But I look at him and I saw a guy who would be almost reborn there. And we saw it a little bit maybe with Sigurdsson when he was at Spurs. Even guys who are key points of bad teams like Timo Pukki. So for me, being in the picture right now is fine. And seeing how he does, I think he'll do fine this summer. I think he's had a lot of injuries, and the freshness is going to be a really nice factor as well. And he may be that player reborn we see. But long term, if we're talking next November and it's the same thing and it's a couple months into the season, I look at him and I looked how he looked when he was waiting to sub into the game. I think it was Men in Blazers who put a little quick meme up of him going, oh, let me in the game. And I just think mentally it's got to be hard for someone that age who was given the number 10 shirt 6 months ago.
Andy, does that kind of play into the feeling that we're getting now with Pulisic, that it's maybe the right place but at the wrong time? He clearly has the talent. He's got the number 10 shirt, but the managers change so often, the philosophies change so often at Chelsea, that he could potentially just wait this out, and Tuchel could have a horrendous run, and he might have another new manager by the time next season rolls around. I very much doubt that, but should he wait it out and try and get back into the team? Because Tuchel clearly rates him and speaks about him positively, right?
That's the thing, is he is potentially one injury or two bad performances defensively from Chelsea, from Tuchel either having to go to him into the starting lineup to replace someone, or switching up from the 3-4-3 that he's gone with, or the 3-4-2-1, whatever you want to call it, and suddenly there's a place in the team for Christian Pulisic. Like it changes so quickly. And I think that, one, that speaks to a new manager in a new job, but more than anything, it speaks to the culture of Chelsea and the way that things just operate there. It is, nobody blinks an eye when there's three managers in a 24-month period at Stamford Bridge. It's just what they do. And, you know, the players are, deal with it. You're professionals. You get paid handsomely. Find your way into the team. Find a way to add value to the new manager. Prove your worth to him. And eventually, it might take a little bit of time, but everybody gets an opportunity at some point. Now, it might be a 90-minute shift. It might be a couple of games in a row, and he will absolutely have to make the most of that. I don't think all hope is completely lost at Chelsea if we're talking about this season in the much shorter term. There's still a lot of ways back into that team. They're still in the Champions League. They're in a good situation against Atletico Madrid, and they could make a deep run in that competition. And he has experience there, from this time at Dortmund. So there's a lot of factors at play over the next, what do they have, 10 games left in league play, and potentially a handful in the Champions League. It's just, I want to see him get an opportunity. That's all I care about. And then we can at least look at it and say, he had his chance. He either took it or he didn't take it. He needs to stay and fight for his place, or he needs to go and find a place that will value him more in line with what the U.S. men's national team needs him to be.
Joe, I was just going to say that I think he is having a rough year to start with. And I mean rough compared to his standards. It's not that he's been bad. It's just he was absolutely electric to finish last year. Maybe the end of the season came at the worst time for him because he had started rolling. And the managerial shift, obviously, he's one of the guys that affected, even though it hasn't affected Chelsea. The one thing that I keep going back to is I think there are two players on Chelsea who really need to get going more than anything. And I love Havertz and I love Ziyech, but it's Werner and it's Pulisic. And if you're honestly asking me how many players under the age of 23 in the Premier League that I believe could be more important and better and higher end than Pulisic. There aren't many, but one of them's Werner. I saw what he did last year. He has this rare combination of everything. So if Tuchel's not going to try and work out 2 guys at once when he has 4 to work out, I do get why Werner's being prioritized. And then Andy clued me into this site. I always go to these advanced stat sites, but he clued me into the Football Reference site. You pull up Pulisic, and he's passing-wise and even defensively amongst wingers, and he's everywhere. And I like to think that Tuchel's a smart enough guy that he's got the numbers people telling him stuff. And in that case, getting a chance is a matter of time. Will he seize it is the question.
And then we look to the next step for him, potentially, because, we've spoken about him in recent weeks, and I know people watching this, especially US men's national team fans, will be very frustrated and saying he has to go somewhere where he can play. There's been links with Bayern Munich. There's other reports in England that Liverpool and Manchester United are keen to try and bring him in. I'm looking at the example of someone like Clint Dempsey, right? We spoke about this earlier this week when we caught up. A superstar at Fulham, played week in, week out, was the talisman on a team in the Premier League. Then he went to Tottenham. He was no longer, that big fish in a small pond. Didn't work out well for him. He still delivered for the US, but I can see you nodding, Andy, is playing regularly key and being the main man on the team key for Pulisic now at this stage in his career? Because he's going to be turning 23 soon, in the months ahead. Does he just need to play regularly, because he hasn't been doing that at Chelsea and then at Dortmund for a little bit as well before this?
It's a really delicate balance between needs to play every game, needs to be the man at a team, and needs to be at a place that really challenges him and pushes him to continue on with his development. Like, he's 22, there's still a ways to go in that for him. And so going to Bayern Munich, leaving Chelsea to go to Bayern Munich isn't exactly quitting and taking the easy way out. You might face more competition if you go to Bayern Munich, but at least it feels like there will be stability around him at a place like that. At a play, there's other clubs in the Premier League where I feel like it would just be kind of a recreation of the situation at Chelsea, where there's so much attacking talent and there's such a demand. Like the demand of the Premier League, from 1 to 20 against all those teams is just so much, and it's so different than any other league in the world that it takes a certain personality and a certain type of character to really not be able to handle that, but to relish that challenge. And if that's not him, that's fine. He just needs to find his place where he can be successful, he can be challenged, he can be further developed, and he can have success. We need him to win something as well. We need Christian Pulisic to be winning at the club level to then bring in a new mentality to the US men's national team.
Quick, let's finish this by name one Premier League team, if it's not Chelsea, where Christian Pulisic should play. Nick?
Oh, God, why would you go to me first? Everton.
Andy?
I wanted to say Everton, but instead I'll say if Mourinho goes, Tottenham would be great.
Brentford.
I'm gonna say Leicester. That I think playing for Brendan Rodgers would be perfect for him. I think it may be early, but if he's in this situation midway through next season, then he has to think about going somewhere to play regularly, see out the campaign. And Nick brought it up earlier. This may work out in the US men's national team's favor this summer, because he may be very fresh and he may actually be playing to put himself in the shop window as well for a move to a big team in Europe or another big Premier League team. So we'll keep you updated on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com with the latest Christian Pulisic news, how he's playing for Chelsea, if he's playing, hopefully he is, and US men's national team fans, interested to hear your comments about the situation, because Thomas Tuchel, that update about him being just a bit of a bench player, good for 20, 30 minutes, I'm sure those quotes will stick for a little while, and Pulisic will be eager to prove him wrong. Gents, let's move on to the next big topic in the Premier League, and that is that it's getting very interesting at the bottom of the table. My question to you is, who is going to be relegated in the Premier League? Because two teams, it seems like we all agree on. I think it's fair to say that Sheffield United and West Bromwich Albion, Chris Wilder and Big Sam Allardyce are going to be getting ready for going down to the Championship. But the relegation battle and the form that some of those teams are in down there, if you look at the table, it's pretty wild. I mean, Fulham, their recent form has been brilliant. They've dragged Brighton, Newcastle, Burnley, even as high as Southampton and Crystal Palace into this scrap with 10 games to go in the season. So, Nick, how do you assess the relegation battle as someone who has a team close to his heart that is getting sucked into this scrap very, very quickly? What do you think is going to happen down there, mate?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that this is without bias. I can do this without bias. I covered a very bad Buffalo Bills team here in Buffalo for many years and was able to do it without bias. I think Newcastle is very bad. And the reason I say that is because they have the talent to be above themselves. They don't have the manager right now. And the situation that they were in to play West Brom, that was the 3 points you were counting on. And what happens in the previous 3 weeks? Callum Wilson gets hurt. Miguel Almiron gets hurt. Alan St. Maximin gets hurt. And they're all out until April. And so, you look at that, and with those guys, you think they've got a win against West Brom, a shot against Villa at home, a shot against Brighton. And instead you're thinking, fortunate maybe to get a point against Brighton, a team that beat them 3-0 earlier this year. So I think the only way the Magpies don't go down is if Fulham implodes or Burnley implodes, because I don't expect it out of Brighton. And as well, just one other point. I know they won last week, but even before we were talking about, Joey, we would needle you a little bit about Saints, but all of the bad teams were left on their schedule. The rough stretch they went through had a lot of good teams on their docket and injuries. So, and the other fortunate team is Palace, because I think they're absolutely very poor, but they're kind of just enough above it to not worry about it.
Andy, Fulham have, really put the cat amongst the pigeons here, haven't they? In terms of their form, I don't think anybody really saw this coming. They did make some good moves in the transfer window. Those guys kind of, Anderson and Tosin, and they've come in and done really well, made a huge difference. It took them a little while to settle down, but how have they done this? How have they changed things? I mean, tactically, we've got to give Scott Parker a huge amount of praise and appreciate what he's managed to do there, because they've gone from a team that were leaking goals at the start of the season to now they have a great balance between defense and attack, and they're really hard to beat, but they're also very good to watch as well, aren't they?
They can be at times. I'll say it's been an incredible job from Scott Parker as a first-time manager as well, and a first season in the Premier League. And I think he's shown a lot of growth or maturity, whatever the right word is, to assess what his ideas were coming into the season, coming up to the Premier League. Well, we want to be one of those teams. I look at Sheffield United just last season. They came up, they had an identity. They wanted to play a certain way. They had a lot of success doing so. And then he probably came in with this idea that, okay, we'll be a good possession team and we'll look to really attack and we'll add something to the league. And we'll try to hang with some of the big boys. And they just got beat down again and again and again and again to start the season. And he looked at it about the halfway point of the season and said, okay, this is not working. This is going to end very badly for us. We've got to do something different. And they have, more than anything, they have just prioritized clean sheets. And if you look at their recent results, there's a lot of zeros that they're giving up of late. And even Liverpool over the weekend, it was not a beautiful, pleasing on the eye performance from Fulham, but it was just very functional. They're tough to play against at the moment. I think that's the most important thing. And if you look at those teams down there at the bottom, I don't think you can really say that about about Brighton, about Newcastle. They just have, whether it's a belief or a tactical kind of foundation to rely on, they have something there at the right time of the season that I don't think anybody else does down there. Now, they've also played one more game than the other two. I think that's the one very important thing to remember is they've played 28. Newcastle and Brighton, who are still ahead of them, have played 27. I think ultimately Fulham still go down. I think it will be very, very close. And probably, if you look at the schedule, the final day of the season at home against Newcastle, but their schedule coming up it's tough for Fulham. They've got City in there. They've got United in there. They've got Arsenal, and they've got a lot of big teams in there.
You can see me rubbing my hands here, and this is as someone of a fan of a club that is usually over the many, many years I supported and been right in the thick of the relegation scrap. And apart from once have survived, obviously Southampton, but I don't see them getting sucked into this, but let's remind everyone of the picture right now. So Sheffield United are in 20th place. They're bottom of the table on 14 points, 12 points from safety with 10 games to go. So, yeah, see you later. They're gone. West Bromwich Albion, not much better off. They're on 18 points. So they're 8 points from safety with 10 games to go. But their schedule's not bad. I'm looking at some of the games coming up, and it's not horrendous. It's not great either. But, you know, you wouldn't put it past Big Sam. They've been unlucky, I think, in recent weeks with some of the draws and some of the games where they just haven't been able, you know, to put away the chances. They've at least got better defensively. I'm trying to stick up for West Brom. I don't quite know why, but and then Fulham, 18th place, occupy the final relegation spot on 26 points. Played one more game than Brighton, who also have 26 points, and Brighton only sit outside the relegation zone on goal difference, and there's 3 goals in it. And then Newcastle are on 27 points, so 1 point above the drop zone, and then Burnley are on 30 points, so they sit 4 points above the drop zone, and they play 28 games as well. So maybe Burnley could get sucked into it. You know, they aren't playing great, and Nick's brought it up before. They're not a team that really you look at them and say they're going to go out and score 2 or 3 goals every game. So, Nick, what's your thoughts about what 3 teams are going down? I think we all agree that Sheffield United and West Brom are going down, right? So, you know, pick your 3rd team to go down.
Well, look, I'm going to say Newcastle. I look at them, and I was at that 538 site, the projection site, and they run the average simulated season, and they had Fulham and Newcastle finishing on the exact same amount of points, and Newcastle going down on goal difference. And I could just see that happening.
And they play each other, right, on the final day of the season. Fulham host Newcastle. I
was super excited, though. They had Brighton on 40 and Burnley on 41. I think Burnley could get dragged in. I really do. It almost feels like they've defied reason for 5 or 6 years. And I don't know. I just think Fulham has right now a key piece in Zambo Anguissa, who might be the best player on a bottom 6 side. It could be one of the backs on Brighton. Mateus Pereira, Sander Berge, if he's not hurt, but I mean, or 7 guys on Newcastle underperforming. But I really think he's the difference, and they keep goals down. I don't see their goal difference slipping, and that could be key.
Yeah, Burnley have scored 2 or 3 goals exactly 4 times all season, Joe. 4 times they have scored multiple goals in a game. So it's a fair statement to say you don't expect them to go out and score 2 or 3 goals. They're a gnat, right? Like, they have been the Premier League's gnat for the last 5 years, just sticking around the Premier League somehow. Nobody really knows how. They do it in a really annoying way that's not fun to watch, without any big names or star players, anything like that. I honestly think they probably finished 17th, just above Fulham, because if you look at what they have done of late, they're picking up points, but they're just stringing it together in a way that doesn't seem like they can continue to replicate this for the rest of the season. And they have a small squad. They've got a toughish schedule coming up. There's just nothing about them that inspires any confidence in me that Burnley are going to keep themselves truly safe from this relegation battle.
Are you saying that Tony Pulis is Sean Dyche's looky-likey?
I think that's what I'm saying. I
don't know where we go from that, but I'm just going to say I'm torn. I agree with both of you that Fulham or Newcastle are the front runners, but something within me tells me that Brighton are going to get relegated because the bad luck or whatever. I mean, see these like stats going around that on expected goals they should be 5th in the table, and they're actually obviously way at the bottom. And for whatever reason, missing 2 penalty kicks against West Brom in the same game, VAR decisions going against them, just
in the same game.
Yeah, and that it adds up, right? It adds up over a season as well. You watch them each week, and Nick, bless him, just waxes lyrical about Graham Potter every single week, and the Seagulls, and loves them, and that is not a good combination. I think over a season, if you keep getting unlucky, time and time again, that's going to build up. and I think there's a negative vibe around Brighton. So I'm going to pick them to go down, and I want to finish by just going back to the start of the season. And here are the 3 teams that I predicted to go down at the start of the season. We did our pre-season predictions: West Brom, Fulham, and Crystal Palace. So Crystal Palace aren't, a million miles away, but that's the outlier there. Nick had Fulham, West Brom, and Burnley. So pretty close there, Nick. Andy Edwards had West Brom, Crystal Palace. We were just hovering above there. And then the outlier is Leeds United. But you had Fulham right down there as well. So I think, we weren't too far off the mark, lads. But it's going to be interesting to see the twists and turns in the relegation battles. Like Nick said, Fulham, Newcastle on the final day, Brighton, Burnley, even Saints and Palace can get dragged back into this. So a lot of more twists and turns to come. And we'll keep you updated on the latest news from the relegation battle and every single game in the Premier League between now and the end of the season up on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com. Right, gents, let's focus on match week 28 now. Let's preview what is another big weekend. So many big games coming up. This is the business end of the season now, and it really starts to feel like it, right? It's springtime over here in England. The sun's out, well, as much as it can be. Daffodils are there, birds are chirping, and managers are quaking in their boots, whether it comes to the top 4 push or the relegation scrap. And Andy, I'm going to start with you. Arsenal against Tottenham, North London derby this weekend. Both teams are in Europa League action, so that's something to keep an eye on when it comes to what their priority is now, heading into the final months of the season. But is this just a top 6 battle now, or do you feel like Spurs can finish in the top 4 given their recent success?
I'm saying nothing that can come back and bite me after the weekend or at any point between now and the end of the season. I will just remark on the fact of how strange and heartwarming it is to see 2 eras of Tottenham about 10 years apart, superstar eras, kind of melt together, and Gareth Bale and Harry Kane setting up Gareth Bale, Harry Kane setting up Gareth Bale, Kane and Bale is the new Kane and Son. It's really, really strange to see Gareth Bale celebrate with Harry Kane after the latter sets up the former for a goal, because it's almost a decade removed from their peaks at Tottenham, and it's happening right now. 6 goals, 3 assists in Bale's last 6 appearances in Tottenham's last 6 games. He's played in 6 games in a row, which I think is probably the most important stat that can exist with him right now. He's not played more than 70 minutes in any of those games, which I think is probably the right approach for him at this point. He's got great history in North London derbies. Harry Kane has excellent history in North London derbies. I don't know.
Nick, are you as happy as Andy is about seeing Gareth Bale back in form and back fit? Because that seems to be the main storyline, right, around Tottenham. And I've got a feeling that he's just going to lead them to glory late in the season, be it League Cup. Look at Andy Winston. League Cup, Europa League, or finishing in the top 4, right?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do. I think that we're seeing a burst of form that almost feels 3 years overdue. This is a player with so much power, and he's a smart guy too. I think maybe sometimes that gets lost because of the power, because of watching him run sometimes it's Nature Channel, though. Like, it's such a perfect human sprinting. So I see that. I will say this: there's a little bit of me, and I know it was more of a cameo in this latter reference. When Andy mentions Kane and Bale, I think of Van Persie and Thierry Henry on the same team when he came back on loan to Arsenal, and it was like, what's going on here? It's just vibes, right? So I don't know. I think this game has a chance to be an all-timer, and I'm circling it in a way that I would almost guarantee we're not watching a 1-0 or a 0-0. Tottenham's defense, Arsenal's defense, Aubameyang looking better, Saka maybe having some freedom on the wings. I'm ready for this one.
There will be goals, and now that we've guaranteed there will be goals, it will be a boring 0-0. Exactly.
It's Mourinho and Arteta. Well, I mean, come on.
Wow. 2 of the brightest young managers in the game, said Jose Mourinho. No, I think both teams are better when they're attacking, right? I mean, defensively, we've seen howlers We saw it last week at Burnley for Arsenal with Xhaka and that terrible giveaway. When they're trying to mess around at the back and play around, then they're not at their best. They're both a few pieces, especially defensively, away from where they want to be. I mean, Arsenal and Tottenham are surely going to be going for a lot of the same defensive players in the transfer market this summer. But going forward, Saka, Aubameyang, Pepe's got his act together for Arsenal, and then Spurs, Kane, Son, Bale, Dele Alli, Ndombele, Lucas Moura, Lamela. I'd probably fancy Spurs to edge it, but there will be goals. And again, we've guaranteed there will be goals. So enjoy the North London derby this weekend. Andy, one quick word from you.
I would just say Spurs have beaten absolutely no one during this run. Burnley, Fulham, and Crystal Palace, 9-1 combined. None of it means anything. So if it completely turns this weekend, it was just a mirage.
There you go. Reverse psychology from Andy Edwards, a lifelong Tottenham fan. Manchester United, West Ham United is another big game coming up this weekend. Nick Mendola, top 4 hopefuls, I think we can say. United look like they're going to seal it. West Ham David Moyes said they're not playing well, and they still beat Leeds United 2-0. They were disappointed with the display. Declan Rice wasn't happy. I kind of fancy the Hammers in this one because this is their kind of game, right? United, they can sit back, soak up the pressure, and then, kind of use those set-piece situations they've been so good at to expose some of the weaknesses in Manchester United, right?
Yeah, and if there is desperation, you would peg it to be more on West Ham right now. Also, they will not have done anything this week besides prepare for Manchester United. They'll get to hang out on Thursday and see what Ole does. And I'm not even sure what he does, because the one comment you pointed out to me after the Manchester derby was him kind of saying, well, we can't just prioritize, it by competition right now or focus on the cups. And to me, going to AC Milan, Manchester United at a resurgent AC Milan, I don't care what competition that is. It matters, and I would be circling it. And I don't think anybody's sure if he is right now. And as much as we look at Arsenal, they're going to be coming back from Greece, and Tottenham's going to be played at home against Zagreb. West Ham's doing nothing. And United, even if they only use half their guys, are going into, a hornet's nest. So I think this is a perfect trap game. And if they win, then we really ought to talk even more about Manchester United.
Andy, West Ham, it feels like kind of a trick that David Moyes is trying to play to keep him motivated. It's like, we can play even better. We can get to higher levels. We've won again, but it's not good enough. Can they finish in the top 4? We spoke about a few weeks ago. We're getting close to the end of the season now, and they're still right up there.
I'm much more a believer now than I was then. And it's been the recent results, but more so the performances. And I agree they weren't great against Leeds on Monday. They got the win though. They got the clean sheet. And once they got into a lead, they were in complete control. They were never really in danger of giving away anything in that game. And I think that's a big sign of progression for this team, because I think we could see, if you look earlier in the season at some of their, some of the ways that they dropped points early in the season, you couldn't have said that. And I'm just looking at the teams that have beaten them this season. Their last 4 losses: Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Manchester United, and Liverpool. So 5, excuse me. They have lost to no one but big teams since the opening 2 days of the season, when they lost to Newcastle and Arsenal. They have a lot of really impressive results this season. They are where they are on merit this season. They have earned the right to battle for this top 4 spot. And I'm with Nick. This sets up, I think, perfectly, absolutely perfectly for West Ham to beat Manchester United this weekend. And that's a scary thing to say out loud, because it can very quickly go the other direction if Manchester United decide to be Manchester United. But I'm believing in this West Ham team. They've got the talent. They're Newcastle a couple years advanced into the future, right, Nick? Like, they've always had that talent. Now they've got a manager that fits the situation that they're in.
Very strong Everton vibes 10 years ago from David Moyes with this West Ham team. They're not the greatest to watch. He's getting every ounce out of them. They're really good as a unit, and they just have players keep stepping up at different times, be it Antonio, Jesse Lingard. Obviously, he can't play this weekend because of his loan move, but and Souček and Declan Rice and Fornals. They just got those key contributors who keep stepping up when they need them each week. So, yeah, Man United, this identity we've spoken about earlier, let's see if it comes to the fore, because they're going to have a lot of the ball. I think West Ham are going to sit back and say, come on to us. Let's see how good you are, and it will hit you on the break. So that's going to be a really good game, and will be really big in determining how the end of the season goes for both of those teams, as they both try and seal Champions League qualification. I can't quite believe I'm saying that. Wolves against Liverpool. Nick, this is probably better for Liverpool to be playing away from Anfield right now, given their incredible run of 6 home league defeats in a row, which, again, can't believe I'm saying that after their near 4-year run of not losing at Anfield in the league. But Wolves, Liverpool, I mean, we got a favourite here. This seems like a very evenly matched game, given Wolves' recent resurgence.
I think I'd be tempted to say Wolves if the game wasn't on Monday. For everything that Jurgen Klopp has hated about their fixture list, for them to play tomorrow at home to Leipzig and get plenty of time off. I've been burnt by this before. I predicted them to beat Fulham. I thought they would hang with Chelsea. I'm not exactly brave to say they would beat Sheffield United. I want to say Wolves are going to do some things here. Maybe Traore puts himself further in the shop window, but I haven't been too impressed by Wolves in a while. I'm really interested to see what happens with them next year, and that tells you a lot about how they're doing this year.
Andy, final word on Liverpool. Can they recover from these heavy defeats at home? Not even heavy, but shocking. That's a better word for it. I mean, it's been a collapse. Let's call it what it is. One of us did predict they wouldn't finish in the top 4. I'm not going to say who, but are they going to finish in the top 4 and recover?
No. I think I was the last off the boat on that one. I was insistent on it, but they're broken. How can you look at this team and not just say that the mind of every player in that team that was on that title winning team that ran away with it last season, and this is happening to them now, that they're not just broken mentally? And I think so much of it is the 3 defenders that they're without. You take away those defenders, their defense sets up their attack, because they have defenders that can defend the entire field. It lets them attack with 7 and 8 players. And once you can't do that anymore, you have to completely build a new attack. And that's hard to do in the middle of the season, when you have to then also rebuild an entire defense with backups and new January. There's a lot going on at Liverpool. And I think I've been probably the harshest on Jurgen Klopp this season with, some of his comments and calling him a bully and stuff, but I feel for him. It's a tough season that he's had to navigate. And I can't think of any manager who wouldn't find himself in this situation with Liverpool, or in the spot where they are given this situation.
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot going on in Liverpool. I feel like we could have a whole episode just on them, a whole 2-hour long special. We probably will do that at some point, considering the dramatic nature of their collapse. But their trip at Wolves to Wolves this weekend is going to be really interesting to see how they respond to those string of disappointing defeats, especially at home. So other games to keep an eye on in the Premier League in Matchweek 28, Southampton against Brighton, South Coast derby. Big game for both of those teams. Saints, can they finally push further away into mid-table? Brighton, can they finally get a bit of luck and grab a win to really ease their own relegation fears? And then the 2 form teams in the Premier League, Fulham against Manchester City. That should be a good one, because, Scott Parker's side will fancy their chances, considering how they've come up against some of the bigger teams in the Premier League in recent weeks, and give them a run for their money. So lots of big games across the Premier League. We'll keep you updated with all of that on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com, with team news, stream links, previews, everything you need. These 3 lads on the screen right here will have you covered. And gents, all that's left for me to say is, as always, an absolute pleasure. Andy Edwards in Kansas City, Nick in Buffalo, New York, and myself over here in England. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for everyone for watching, and enjoy the Premier League games this weekend. Cheers.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe. Make sure you subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and join us at the weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern on NBCSN for Premier League mornings, and sign up for Peacock Premium, where you'll have access to 175 exclusive live games all season long.